do the work for us behind the scenes every day. It truly takes a village.
All right, let's start. We'll go to them.
Amber, with the status of labor talks with so many free agents, with an expansion draft, do you have any idea what this offseason might even look like?
Just as the Indiana Fever's offseason appeared destined for silence and predictable mediocrity, emerging reports have transformed the entire narrative in ways that nobody could have anticipated. While organizational changes were anticipated following leadership restructuring and the disappointing end to what should have been a breakthrough season, the sheer boldness of what's unfolding has caught the league off guard and sent rival front offices scrambling to reassess their own strategies. Sources indicate the franchise is pursuing an ambitious strategy centered on Caitlin Clark and a targeted free agent acquisition that has rival teams on high alert and openly concerned about competitive balance. This isn't incremental roster improvement or the cautious moves typically associated with rebuilding franchises. It's an all-in gamble aimed at accelerated championship contention, backed by eye-popping financial commitments that are rewriting expectations for what a rebuilding franchise is willing to invest and how quickly transformation can occur. The transformation began with a complete overhaul of basketball operations that sent shockwaves through the organization and signaled to everyone paying attention that business as usual was dead and buried. When the Fever parted ways with head coach Christy Sides, it signaled a fundamental philosophy shift that went far beyond simple coaching changes. Mediocrity would no longer be tolerated, patience had officially run out, and excuses about development timelines were no longer acceptable. Kelly Kroskoff's return to leadership brought immediate strategic recalibration, drawing on her previous success building competitive rosters in Indiana and her deep understanding of what it takes to construct championship-caliber teams in a salary-capped environment. Rather than patient development and gradual improvement stretched over multiple seasons, the new direction emphasizes instant competitiveness and aggressive roster upgrades that prioritize winning now over theoretical future potential. After evaluating existing personnel and available resources with brutal honesty, management concluded that half measures wouldn't suffice and that the window of opportunity with their young star demanded immediate action rather than comfortable incrementalism. Their blueprint centers on pairing their transcendent young talent with proven veterans who have been tested in high-pressure situations, regardless of expense or conventional wisdom about how rebuilding teams should operate. The missing piece they've identified requires a particular skill set. A player who thrives in physical, confrontational basketball and isn't intimidated by the league's most aggressive defenders or biggest personalities. Enter Sophie Cunningham, the Phoenix Mercury guard, entering unrestricted free agency at precisely the moment Indiana needs her most and when her specific talents align perfectly with what the Fever desperately lacked. League. Sources suggest she tops Indiana's wish list. And the logic is compelling when you examine what the Fever lacked throughout last season and how opposing teams exploited those weaknesses with surgical precision. Throughout her debut campaign, Clark absorbed relentless physical punishment from seasoned defenders who tested her repeatedly while receiving limited protection from teammates who either couldn't or wouldn't match that intensity or make opponents pay for their aggression. The physical toll was visible in multiple games where Clark's body language showed frustration, not just with losing, but with the lack of response when she was being targeted. Cunningham brings precisely what the Fever lacked throughout that difficult season. A combative, fearless presence who defends aggressively, plays with an edge that intimidates opponents and changes how they approach the game, and stretches defenses beyond the arc with consistent perimeter shooting that prevents help defenders from collapsing. Word around front offices suggests Indiana's offer will significantly exceed market expectations for a player of her profile, potentially establishing new benchmarks for role players in free agency and forcing other teams to reconsider their own valuation frameworks. The willingness to overpay isn't recklessness or desperation. It's calculated investment in changing the team's identity overnight and sending an unmistakable message about the franchise's seriousness. The financial component, however, represents only part of this unprecedented proposition being assembled in Indianapolis with increasing sophistication. The truly insane element involves what's being extended to Caitlin Clark herself, going far beyond traditional rookie treatment and establishing precedents that could reshape how franchises approach their relationship with transcendent talents. Rookie-scale contracts prevent Indiana from simply increasing her salary to reflect her marketability and on-court impact, which far exceeds typical first-year players. So they're reportedly offering something potentially more impactful in the long run. Meaningful input on roster construction and organizational direction that acknowledges her unique position, while the extent remains unclear and the franchise hasn't publicly confirmed these arrangements for obvious competitive reasons. Speculation suggests Clark is receiving genuine consultation on personnel decisions. Essentially, collaborative power in teammate selection. That franchise is typically reserved for established veterans with years of leverage and proven track records. The message being conveyed is clear and unprecedented in its directness. We'll pursue whoever enhances your success, and your voice matters in these decisions because we recognize you're not a typical rookie. Current indications point toward her prioritizing a tough-minded shooter who can both space the floor and provide the physical presence that was sorely lacking during her rookie campaign when too many games felt like Clark against the world while her teammates watched from the periphery. This approach directly addresses Indiana's primary vulnerability from last season, which opposing coaches ruthlessly exploited throughout the year with game plans specifically designed to test the Fever's toughness and mental fortitude. Opponents consistently deployed aggressive traps and physical coverage against Clark, exploiting the lack of threatening secondary options and testing whether her teammates would respond to escalating physicality or simply accept the punishment passively. The strategy worked more often than not as Indiana lacked players willing to match that intensity or capable of making defenses pay for overcommitting to Clark with defensive rotations that left other players wide open. The psychological impact was visible. Teams knew they could rough up Clark without significant consequences, and that calculus needs to change dramatically if Indiana hopes to compete. Securing Cunningham would provide both floor spacing that prevents defenses from collapsing without fear of consequences and on-court protection that changes how physical opponents can be without immediately facing retaliation or at minimum an escalating confrontation. Picture a backcourt where defenses can't abandon Clark without conceding open three-pointers from one of the league's more reliable perimeter threats. Yet aggressive coverage risks immediate confrontation with an enforcer-type teammate who has built her reputation on never backing down from any challenge regardless of opponent or stakes. That psychological shift alone alters competitive dynamics in ways that don't always show up in box scores, but fundamentally change how opponents approach game planning. Explaining why rival executives are monitoring this situation nervously and preparing contingency plans for a scenario where Indiana suddenly becomes significantly more difficult to play against. The aggressive timeline carries strategic significance beyond roster building and reflects broader industry shifts that are transforming the women's basketball landscape at unprecedented speed. With the newly launched unrivaled 3-on-3 league offering substantial six-figure contracts and providing off-season competition for player services that didn't exist previously, WNBA franchises face unprecedented competition for player commitment and mind share in ways that were unthinkable just a few years ago. Indiana's front office recognizes they're competing not just for talent, but for attention, loyalty, and the narrative of being a destination franchise rather than a stepping stone that players leave at the first opportunity. By presenting these compelling offers immediately rather than waiting to see how the market sending profile and the potential to be part of something historic that transcends typical basketball narratives outweighs the comfort of familiar situations elsewhere or the guaranteed money from alternative leagues that can't match the WNBA's competitive intensity. It's a calculated bet that players value legacy and winning potential alongside financial compensation, and that the opportunity to build something special in Indiana is worth more than maximizing short-term earnings. The broader implications extend beyond Indiana's roster construction to the league's competitive balance and could fundamentally reshape how teams approach the offseason. If this acquisition materializes, as reported with a rumored financial commitment, it would definitively close Indiana's rebuilding chapter and inaugurate a win-now era that could accelerate similar moves across the league as franchises realize the old playbook no longer applies. The franchise possesses cap flexibility that most teams lack after years of modest spending, generational talent that can't be acquired through conventional means like the draft or development, and apparently the conviction to execute high-stakes moves that carry significant risk if they don't produce immediate results and justify the substantial investment.